Hey guys, hope you're doing all right. Got your papers? Seems like I got almost everybody's, I think. And those of you who didn't get one to me, I believe, had contacted me. So looking good there. After I get done with this lecture, which I'm going to try to break into 3 parts, make it a little bit easier to upload. I'll be posting a forum discussion. There's going to be a few specific questions I do have for you. This is a story fits. Really like that interaction. I'm gonna miss that today just because I think there's some questions in here that don't really have a for sure answer. All right, there's questions in here where it's really interesting to kind of see where you kind of land because it's just, I don't know. You'll see what I'm talking about here in a second. But anyway. So I'll get that posted, and we'll move on down the line. So I hope you're enjoying Munro so far. I really enjoyed your feedback that I've seen. Hope to see a little bit more now that you got your Revolutionary Road paper out of the way. So Fitz gives us a sort of a genre story, if you will, but it is seen through the filter of both the Munro sort of psychology, her motifs, her themes, and her structure. This is not a whodunit, and it's not even a why-done-it. Eventually, usually when something's not a whodunit, it's more about a why something happened. In that case, it's not. The trick here is that the mystery, not unlike what would have happened if the little girl would have drowned in Miles City, Montana. Sort of would have been an unknown. You never would have known why. That ends up being the case with the Weebles. We don't know. I think in reality, we could probably assume it was something. I mean, you don't want to ever write something like this off as simple, but it's something less complicated than the town was willing to accept. They felt like they needed answers. They needed and again, that's something we've already talked about, why they need that, so they don't, it scares them if there's no solution, if there's no reason why something like this act of violence, it looks like he murdered his wife and then he killed himself. Spoiler, but they need something, and when they don't get that, they're sort of lost. But that's not the point of the story. That's secondary. That's the trigger for the main characters, Peg and Robert. Their last names. Is it Cooper? Anyway, but Peg and Robert especially. Peg is a silent character in this, in that she is very, very internalized. She keeps things to herself to an extreme, as you'll see. So one of the rare occasions where our Munro main character is a male, and it's because you wouldn't have the same story if we saw this from Peg's point of view. I don't even know if we'd be able to see from Peg's point of view because she's really sort of closed off there, iced over, if you will, as a motif that sort of appears in this story quite a bit. That stuff that's buried under, and again, we've seen that in. Especially in Progress of Love, but you should be getting used to that in Munro by now. So, like I said, it's opens up, it lets us know that there were 2 people who died. It gets that death out in the open, kind of creates a sense of mystery. We realize later that when we're getting this description of the Weebles right in that first section, tall, well-built, little extra weight, I think they're in their 60s, and they're telling about some of their trips they'd gone on. We understand later that this is sort of a search for clues. Did I see anything then that could tell me that this was going to happen? Of course, which we don't get. It was on Boxing Day in Canada, so they're neighbors of Robert and Peg, and we'll find out later that they're basically people who retired to this town. They have no connection to this town. Maybe an aunt from long ago, but that aunt's passed on. So there's sort of a mystery. Just they came to this place to retire. They take some trips. And that's it. They'd gone to see a place in the Yucatan, looked like a well where virgins were supposed to have been flung down in hope of a good harvest. Actually, that's just a 19th century notion. It's just 19th century notion of being so preoccupied with virginity. This is interesting considering how we've talked about this so far. Across the room, And this is this connection that Munro makes very, very well. You hear some clomping in the background. That's my daughter. It was her birthday yesterday, and she got a pair of roller skates. Across the room, Peg's two sons, the older one, Clayton, who was a virgin, and the younger one, Kevin, who was not, watched the breezy talking, silverly blonde woman with stern, bored expression. She had said, used to be a high school English teacher. Clayton remarked afterward that he knew the type. So we have Clayton and Kevin. Now, you're like, well, again, we get back to virginity. Now we're talking about guys. Is it just, in this case, Munro, all Munro's doing there is she's using the trigger of the story that was being told to at least tell us something about these boys as a sort of a transitional explanation. And you will note in Munro, and this is not to say that virginity or not virginity is any sort of automatic sign of maturity or things like that, but it is an experience that one hasn't had. You will see quite a bit. You maybe even saw this a little bit with Progress of Love, maybe, where the difference in age where the younger one maybe is a little bit more experienced in some ways, and kind of saw that with Progress of Love. Although I don't think Beryl's story was right, but Beryl does seem like the more worldly character in that last story. But there's usually this sort of we're not used to the older one sort of seeming a little bit more immature in a way, but we get that several times in Munro stories. Okay, now we get past it. We get Robert and Peg, and they've been married for 5 years. Her kids that she has are from another marriage. Robert had never been married before. Peg had been married when she was 18. Her two boys were born while she and her husband lived with his parents on a farm. He was a truck driver. Other truck driving jobs followed, taking farther and farther away. Peg and the boys moved to Gilmore. Her husband ended up in the Arctic, driving trucks to oil rigs across the frozen Beaufort Sea. She got a divorce. So this is planted here, and then we're going to find out more about it later on. It's buried a lot like the ice. So he's a truck driver. Her ex-husband's a truck driver on the ice. Ice, of course, is great, image of something that covers up something below. We've seen that, a lot in Munro stories, but it really comes up here. Robert's family had owned the Gilmore Arcade, which is like a shopping center, which is this grocery store. It's where Peg works. And for a long time, Robert was sort of aimless. He didn't really take after his father. He would date. He'd date a few married women. Is that right? His third married woman. He brought Lee with him to Gilmore one time. She brought a picnic lunch, drank Pimm's, and really kind of thought it would be like this fun experience, this girlfriend he had. And they thought that she would like make love in the open field, and it would be like a romance novel. And it turns out there's like this cow looking at them or whatever. Anyway, Robert's father died. Robert did change his life. And instead of becoming a teacher and heading for the wilderness, he came to live in Gilmore, managed the stores himself. He married Peg. Now we get back to the mystery. And again, this story unfolds like exploring a house. And really, Peg literally explores a house in this story. So by accident, Peg finds him because the night before, a farm woman brings the Coopers, Robert and Peg, over their eggs. And she's like, can you take these eggs tomorrow to the Weevils? They weren't home when I knocked. So they're like, sure, no problem. Now, this is, again, a clue that we don't know yet that maybe this thing had already happened. This horrible event had already happened because of the way the snow is let off. And then we get this great description of Robert. Robert is a stocky, athletic man, curly, gray hair, bright brown eyes. He's friendly. He obliges. He's emphatic. People feel like maybe they're being sort of buffeted from all sides. He's outgoing. Societally speaking, he's sort of normal. He's an extrovert. He's a good people person. He is, and it works well for him because he owns these stores. People know him. These conversations, sort of a dance of good intention. On the other hand, his wife, especially for a Gilmore person, now that sort of ties into town and there's sort of this small town mentality that comes into the story a little bit later on. Peg's reserved. She just relieves the woman of her eggs. It's a transactional smile, nothing personal. Peg, told her, one time Robert told Peg she was so self-contained, and he explained And she said, didn't know what you meant. He explains. She's like, I know what the words mean. I just don't know how I'm that. We also find out that Peg takes courses. She doesn't take courses for grades. She takes courses to learn. She's private. She's reserved. She's an introvert. We see these two different types of characters, and this plays a part later in how the town sees Peg after this event. So Robert gets up before dawn. He looks out over this they live sort of on a dead end, and there's this sort of ugly spot, but like when it's frozen over, it's really beautiful. And like, so you can see this all in the background, frozen over again. He works on all these stores himself. So there's a leak, apparently up in Keneally, and it's good. The ice had cracked, it's melted, and it's caused this leak. He has to fix that. That's sort of a sign of things to come with these sort of things boiling under the surface. Okay, so, and we find out then that the house is actually the house where Peg and the boys had moved when they first got here. So it's a house she had before she knew Robert. And he's like, I'll buy another house. And she assumed they would do that, but she didn't want to because she couldn't see herself in those places. He offered to build a new house. She didn't want that either. She wanted to stay in this house. It was the first house she and the boys had lived in on their own. So it had some sort of power to her, some sort of meaning. So Robert bought it. She was only renting, and built on the master bedroom and another bathroom, made a television room in the basement. So here we go again. It's a house, yet it's being added on to. It's becoming something else, like ourselves. Like we sort of add these layers to us. House still looked from the street like the house he parked in front of the first time, but there's some differences inside. He sees the Weebles' eggs. He backs out. He sees the Weebles' car, and he notices that the snow had been thrown up in front of the driveway. The town snow had not been cleared, so it must have gone by during the night. But he hadn't had to shovel himself any snow. So basically, it means they were home last night when the egg lady came by. But it's nothing he thinks about at the point. Then we get this paragraph, this section. He pictured what happened, first from the constable's reports, then from Peg's, and he has to picture what happened because, first of all, he gets a report from the constable. He's not there, so he gets a report from the constable first. He's coming back into town. Then he gets a report from Peg, and it's like a report he gets from her. So she's not going to describe it explicitly. That's just not like her. So this is him picturing how it went. Although I think he's probably pretty close to being accurate here. She comes out of the house. Clayton had already gone to school. Kevin, getting over an ear infection, was down in the basement playing a Billy Idol tape. Is Kevin the older one or the younger one? Kevin's the younger one. She'd forgotten the eggs. She got in her car, turned on the engine to warm up, got back to the eggs, goes to the house. Find out the houses on the street all had three basic designs originally. Now they've all sort of been altered. It's this really interesting look at what an old neighborhood looks like once things start to get added on to it. And we find out that the house that the Weebles lived in, what do you have? The house that the Weebles live in had that was a dog, it wasn't a child, had a similar floor plan as their own. So she kind of knows her way around. So she opens the door, the kitchen, doesn't look in the utility room. And then she's gonna put the eggs on the counter so they can find them because they wouldn't think of looking. So she just keeps going into the house even though nobody's answering. And read this paragraph in parentheses. This, in fact, was Robert's explanation to himself. She didn't say all that, but he forgot she didn't. She just said, I thought I might as well take them up to the kitchen. He needs to justify, and you'll see why, and we know why even later. He needs to justify her continued descent into this dark, dark situation, why she keeps going. Kitchen had those same bamboo curtains over the sink window, over the breast sink window. House was warm. So, they turned on the heat at some point. So perhaps they'd gotten up a while ago, gone back to bed. She calls again. Living room's perfectly tidy. Hold on one second. I'm going to stop it right there.